Welcome to Successfully Ambiguous, the podcast that guides professionals through the changing world of work. I'm Christine Brooks Cappadocia, Assistant Vice President of Continuing Studies at York University. I'm on a mission to help professionals and employers upskill and thrive in a changing world of work. In this show, we meet leaders who've turned ambiguity into opportunity so you can find your own way and your own path to your success. Today, we're going to meet Doctor Sawchuk, President and CEO of the Canadian Business Valuators. She's an educator, a DEI and women's equity advocate, and expert in what's happening in this changing economy and how that adds value to your business. So let's meet Christine. You have such an interesting career path. You started out in what is a fairly traditional role, but then took your education in accounting in a way that, yes, it's a field connected to accounting, but it's not one that, when you're in elementary school and asked, what do you want to do when you grow up? I'm not sure anyone actually says, I'd like to be a business valuator.
Yes, took a few right-hand turns.
What does a business valuator do?
It's a good question. It's actually a difficult question to answer. And what a business valuator does is quite simply assess the value of a business, an intangible asset, or a financial instrument for a wide variety of purposes. As they work in public accounting firms doing financial reporting, they do litigation support work, they do transaction advisory work, they work in pension plans overseeing the investment valuation and the actual making of investments. They work in corporate roles and business development.
Well, and I understand CBVs are often involved in dispute resolution when, say, a partnership dissolves or a family dissolves in figuring out what the assets are worth.
That's right, yes. So a CBV will be called in by legal counsel for assistance in calculating the value of either the economic damages or the value of an asset, most usually a business that's owned by one of the spouses. And in those situations, it's essential that the CBV is acting in an independent capacity. So they're not providing advice. They're acting as an independent expert supporting the court.
Christine, we both have stood on the shoulders of giants, right? The women who have come before have paved the way for us, but there's still some challenges to any woman being in nearly any profession. And you've been a great advocate for women in the business valuation role and the accounting field in general. Can you tell me about some of the challenges that women face and how they might overcome them?
Yes, thank you. So thank you, first of all, for the compliment. I try to be an advocate and ally for anybody in underrepresented population. And certainly business valuation, it's a bit unique because most of our members and students already go through the CPA process or the CFA process before they join our program of studies and go through the education. So the age that they're joining our program at is, mid to late 20s. And that's a time of life where a lot of women are making decisions about, personal versus professional commitments and starting a family. So there are other unique, I think, personal matters that are, going on. The other challenge, and I don't think this is unique to business valuation, but really finance or any type of business profession, is that women are less likely to put up their hand and apply for a role unless they think that they are 100% qualified and fit every single attribute that is being looked for by the hirer. Then it's a bit of a different story. So, when women are seeing these great positions pop up in pension funds and Big Four and corporations, if there's one element that they don't think they don't fit, they're not putting their hand up and applying. So that's, occasionally holding back quite a few women from advancing in their careers in that aspect.
That is a good point, right? We tend to be very reluctant and to try it and grow within a position. You mentioned the age of people joining the profession, and do they always come from accounting and finance roles, or is there room for people with non-linear paths?
Yeah, there's definitely room for people that are not coming through that traditional path, as we refer to it in the organization. And what we're seeing is more and more people come in from roles that require business valuation expertise. And when I say that, I mean, we're seeing people come in, from engineering backgrounds. We're seeing people come in from general arts backgrounds. And these people are in roles, mainly business development or some sort of transaction, assessment or advisory work, where they see that critical thinking and financial analysis would be helpful to their job, and they take that step. And I really admire those people. I love talking to them. I love learning about, what they do and why they decided to enter the program, because it's an entirely different process than what I undertook and what most of our members undertook.
Well, and it's a growing field from what I understand with really good salaries and good career outlooks. So people should be thinking about this.
Definitely. The salaries are extremely competitive. Most people will get a bump in their salary because it's an additional specialization, obviously. The employment rate, I think, is close to 100%.
You don't hear that
You
often.
don't hear that often. No, it's not an exaggeration. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of things going on in the economy and the business world right now that require someone with business valuation expertise. And, just a few of them would be the increasing nature of capital or intangible assets in companies. Most of the value of the stock markets is intangible assets right now, and they are extremely difficult to value unless you have a specialization in that. Another factor that's increasing the demand of CBVs is the incoming successions that we're expecting of small business owners in Canada. Small businesses are, it's 98% of the businesses in Canada, and most of those owners are expected to retire. They're baby boomer age, in the next 8 to 10 years. And they will need someone to advise them on how to grow the value of the business, how to sell it, how to transition it to the next generation, so that they know that they're leaving it in the right hands, or they're getting the most money that they can possibly get for that.
Well, and as the child of a woman who started her own business, that becomes your retirement plan, is
Exactly.
selling the business.
And it's your legacy as well, too, right? So there's other aspects other than the financial that you want to make sure you surround yourself with the appropriate experts to help you with that.
Exactly, and leave it in good hands so that it continues.
Exactly.
It does become a small business does become part of the family in a way. It's that extra kid.
The small business not only impacts the family, it impacts the employees, it impacts the local economy, it impacts the broader economy. So, this succession transfer that we're expecting to see in Canada is supposed to be in the realm of $2 to $3 trillion. And you can imagine, and this is one thing that keeps me up at night, if these people aren't getting good advice, and I'm not saying just from CBVs, I'm saying from their accountants, from their lawyers, investment professionals, if they're not getting good advice, that could impact a lot of people in Canada.
Will change our economy.
Exactly.
Right? It certainly will. I know you've been a strong advocate for women in the field, but you've been a strong advocate for any underrepresented group. As you think about the changing economy and the changing political situation, we're hearing every so often someone will tell me, "Oh, you shouldn't be doing as much work as the school does on DEI because DEI is going away."
Mhm.
I'm a firm believer that DEI is not dead. From
Yes.
your vantage point, is it dead? Is it something we should be double down on, or is it status quo?
From my vantage point and from, other professionals that I talk to, it's certainly not dead. In Canada, people are holding firm. They're maintaining the course. Some organizations are reframing it. I think very, very few organizations that I'm aware of and that I speak to are actually pulling back. So at the most, there's, reframing going on. And, the reason why I'm such an advocate for DEI is that as we increase technology and AI into our workforces, we are necessarily going to have to be better at emotional intelligence, better at critical thinking, more creative, more innovative. And you can only do that around a table if you have a set of diverse opinions and perspectives that are contributing to a conversation. And you want the smartest people around the table. And if you are not advocating for underrepresented populations and raising them up and raising everyone up, how do you know that you have the smartest and the brightest and the most creative people around the table? You don't. So I think it's a necessity, not only for business and corporate purposes, but it's also the right thing to do. It's the rising tide will lift everyone up.
Well, and I think as we become a more diverse society and we look at global marketplaces more, right? We're not just trading with one other country anymore. We need to understand the communities and have some vantage point into some of the tripwires, but also some of the opportunities that may not be visible to those of us who don't come from those communities.
Exactly. And a big part of that is, cultural intelligence. And a big part of that is introspection and learning what you don't know. and forcing yourself to, be educated and be open to different perspectives and seeing things with a different lens.
You started out in accounting, and I know you'd had your master's in education, and now you've gone and become Dr. Sawchuk with your latest educational venture. What inspired that?
I spent 30 to 35 years of my life in some sort of formal education, which is some people might think is nutty, but I think it's well invested. When I was younger, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with my life. I considered teaching, I considered accounting, I considered optometry until I realized that I hated physics. And I ultimately landed on accounting, started in audit and tax. And then I was lucky enough that my organization had a business valuation department. And so that work sounded really cool, really interested, and I moved there. So that required me to move on, get my CPA, see at the time, get my CBV designation. Um, while I was working in public accounting, I was also teaching at Mohawk College. I thought it was a good opportunity to get up and learn public speaking skills. Further my interest in distilling information down to a level that people could understand. And then I ended up moving to a company in Toronto. And while I was working in business valuation, I was also teaching the CBV courses. So education is a underlying thread, I think, throughout my professional life. I ended up joining the Institute after my maternity leave. I went on maternity leave in 2013, and it was a time of introspection. I had to think what I really wanted out of my life and my career and how I can balance that. And when the job popped up at the CBV Institute as the director of education, I thought, it's a great opportunity. And so when I joined the Institute, we had great, brilliant CBVs working here. We had brilliant admin staff, but we didn't have anyone in education. So we knew what to teach to the students. We didn't know how to teach it. We didn't know how to assess them. So at that point is when I decided to get my master's of adult education so I could bring a different perspective. And then when I was 3/4 done that, I said, if I still have some steam, I'm going to do my doctorate. And so I did my doctorate. And I wrapped it up in 2021. And it was an interesting time because I had just taken over the role of CEO. My daughter was home getting homeschooled because of COVID. My husband was doing his MBA. So it was a challenging time. But I ended up finishing my doctorate, and I've luckily taken a few years to decompress before I figure out what my next educational journey is.
I love that. And you're setting both you and your husband are setting such a good example for your daughter that it's never too late. And if there's something missing that you want to explore, go off and learn about it and bring it
Yeah.
in.
And I mean, I tell people that all the time. It doesn't matter if you don't have it figured out when you're 20 or 25 or even 30. Jobs and careers are going to look so different a year from now. And the only way that you can prepare yourself for what's next is by keeping your mind open, thinking more about what you want to do versus the position you want to be in, and just building your skill sets and your foundation that you can, transfer to wherever you end up working.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is such good advice for all of our listeners and learners. You have a unique vantage point on the Canadian economy because you see what's adding value to Canadian businesses and in aggregate and individually. Is there some advice for those listeners who are business people, whether they own their own, most of them will own their own small businesses based on our economy or work in small businesses,
Mhm.
or whether they're navigating a larger corporate environment? Is there some advice you would like to give Canadian businesses that you wish we knew?
Yeah, so I think the elephant, or maybe not so much the elephant in the room, is AI and automation. Um, Simply from an efficiency point of view, it needs to be incorporated into your admin work, into your production, into your marketing. And I'm not saying that should take over the roles of your employees or staff, but it should certainly assist them in doing that rote work so that they can focus on higher level strategic tasks. One of the matters that is, being reported in the news quite frequently now is Canada's lack of innovation and Canada's lack of productivity compared to our peer countries. And that's one of PM Carney's mandates, right, is to increase, to boost innovation, to increase capital formation within the country. So I think, any way a company can step back and think how they can contribute to that, how they can be innovative to increase their productivity, will boost the whole economy. And I tell young professionals that as well when they're looking for a job and if they're worried about AI and automation. There's going to be so much you can do in the advisory and consulting space, and you don't need to be a tech genius or an AI genius. There will be many roles supporting those people in those roles. So finance and HR and law. these companies will need to change the way they do business, and they will need advisors helping them to do that.
Absolutely. And it's funny, we interviewed John Weigelt, National Technology Officer for Microsoft Canada, on the podcast early on. I think it was our first or second interview. And he talked about the small businesses in Canada that he meets with. Often the business owners are reluctant to use AI. And then he has that conversation. Well, how did you get here today? Did you pull out a map? Or did you, use Google? Did you use something on your phone to get you there?
Exactly.
And so we are using AI. We have to recognize it, embrace it, and learn for new ways to play and leverage and add value.
Yeah, and you know what? So many times, in so many cases, there's going back to the subject of intangible assets. There's so many types of intangible assets that an owner has grown within their business that they just don't realize is marketable, or that they can monetize it. So sometimes it's as simple as hiring someone from the outside to come in to see what you actually have and what you can actually do with it, and that could kickstart, a whole different stream of earnings, or a totally different area of focus for the company.
It's a really interesting outlook on that.
Mhm.
Christine, it has been such a pleasure to chat with you as always, but definitely on the podcast. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you having you come onto the show today.
Great. Thanks for having me, Christine.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Successfully Ambiguous. Be sure and subscribe to us on YouTube and listen to us on Apple and Spotify. If you've got career questions, be sure to email me at successfullyambiguous@yorku.ca. Don't forget, when opportunity knocks, be ready to answer.